Okay, more weight painting. Everyone's favorite, right? Okay. Um, a lot of this you're just going to be going through and doing it yourself. You will learn a lot as you do it and kind of get a really good feel. But as we get closer and closer to how we want these weights painted, and we want to start seeing how it's going to deform. Because right now we can paint whatever we want to whatever area, and it doesn't change how the model looks. It's not until we move the joints that we'll see how that is influenced. So when we're moving our joints, well, there's a few things you want to really keep in mind. So we don't want to move our joints using our translate tool. Do not do that. Okay. We want to test our joints using our rotate tool. We worked really hard to make sure all of our joints had a 0 rotation so that we could rotate this and easily get back to our bind pose by typing in 0. Now we haven't done anything too crazy. So if we were like this and we did move this out and it done like a bunch of stuff and we're like, crap, I can't just undo it. Life is not over. We can actually just go up to our skin, and there is the bind pose that we created, and there's this option, go to bind pose. So we can click that and we'll snap everything there. So do not rely on that too much, because as we do more and more things, the bind pose can kind of get lost as we add more and more stuff. So do not fall back on thinking that that will always save you, because you'll probably get in a situation where you've done something, or you were rigging, you've taken over control of the skeleton, and now all of a sudden you can't get back to your bind pose. Okay, or your bind pose got deleted. So don't rely on that. Instead, make sure you're rotating your tools, and you can see like, hey, look, I'm rotating this on my shoulder and I'm getting these verts here. Okay. If we have some crazy verts happening, there's a few things we can do. We can paint it out. We can go to our component editor, or we can use the weight hammer tool. And the weight hammer tool, what you would do is you would go to your vertex mode, so F9 in component mode, and you can select the offending verts. Okay, one or two of them generally is all that you need. And then you're going to hit shift and your period key to grow your selection. You can even do that once or twice. And then you're going to go up to skin, and there's this hammer skin weights. What it's going to do is it's going to find these outlying influences that don't make much sense, and it's going to hammer them down. So it'll look like someone has taken a hammer and just hammered these verts down. So you just select a couple, you grow your selection once or twice, you go to skin, hammer skin weights, bam. So it just quickly eliminated that. Now, it doesn't work 100% all the time, but it does a fair job of getting rid of some of the crazy that might be happening in areas that you don't like. So there's some verts in here. We can do the same thing. So skin, hammer skin weights, and it's going to bang those back into place by getting rid of some crazy influence. Okay. Back into object mode. So now we've made those changes. It's really easy to get back into our bind pose, but we can kind of see like, yeah, there's still a little bit of influence on that, right? The hammer skin weights tool didn't get rid of everything. And as we bend it, we can see how that affects our model. So we can go like this, and we can go. When it's in a pose, it can be a little easier to go to our paint weights tool, and we'll go into our shoulder, left shoulder, and we're gonna go back to replace and hit a value of 0. But first we're just gonna go in and hit our shift key and smooth this. And you can see what it's doing, right? As you're smoothing, it is pushing it back because it's smoothing out those influences. Okay, and that's what we want to do. We want to get this nice happy medium where we're losing influence from nothing and gaining it to 100% and making those bends really good. So these are the areas that are really, really critical for your weight paints. So we're just going to use a lot of smoothing here. You can see it's smoothing these out. Now, this is kind of like a wrinkle right here. So the value of these are going to be a little bit closer than what the smooth is doing. Okay, the smooth is pushing these away. So I'm actually going to go to my add tool. I'm going to add just a tiny bit, 0.05. I'm going to make my brush fairly small. So I can go in and just, when I click on these, it adds a little bit there and it's pushing it away. So I'm going to go to my clavicle and I'm going to add influence on these. So it makes it just a little bit closer by just pushing that a little bit forward. And if we click back to our shoulder, we can do the same on the opposite side. Just add a little bit back onto that. And then maybe we'll kind of smooth it as we go. We can kind of smooth this. And maybe we smooth this just a little bit. Okay, we're going to hit our E key to get out of the paint weights tool so we can rotate our shoulder, and we can kind of see how that is being affected. So maybe this should have a little more influence on the clavicle here. So we'll go back to our paint weights tool and back to our clavicle. And we're just going to add, remember I just have this little value on the add. I'm just going to add a little bit of influence on that to get that looking nice. Like I got these crazy values here that I don't like, but we'll get to that. Okay, so we got a little more influence there. And then maybe back here, maybe we'll add just a tiny bit. We'll just go to our smooth tool. And it just adds this little tiny bit of influence, excuse me, to this by just smoothing it. And then hitting our E key and going back to our rotate tool, we can kind of rotate and see how that is looking and falling off. So that's not so bad. Now your elbow doesn't act, or your shoulder doesn't actually bend this way, but it's a good way to kind of see what's happening on the underside. And we can go here and work on some of these weights as well. So generally smoothing will do a lot that we're looking for from this. So we'll just smooth this out a tiny bit. Okay. Maybe we'll add a little bit of influence on here. A lot of playing back and forth. maybe we'll smooth these just a tiny bit, just to add a little bit of influence and see how that looks. So we'll go back to our E and we'll rotate down and see how that looks. It's like, okay. It's okay. Right now, we still have this. We're going to go to F9 and we're going to go into our component editor again. So Windows, General Editors, Component Editor, and this pocket has a lot of influence from a lot of weird places. So nothing from the left shoulder. I don't know, maybe a little bit on the left clavicle and the mid back, definitely, but not the neck, not the right clavicle. So we're going to zero those out. Okay. Okay, so now when we rotate our shoulder, you'll notice there's no weird movement here. Okay. And then we're going to be doing this a lot over the whole thing. So, like, this is pretty crazy, but we can actually kind of start bending it up into position, come up here and go to our paint weights tool, and we can go down and we can find our hip. Here's our pelvis, and here's our hip. And we're going to go back to replace, move it to 0, our value to 0 on our brush. And we got to get rid of all this influence here. So you can see how that pushes everything back to the joint or the other joints. Since we've only moved the hip joint, it doesn't affect, it's going to just push it back to basically its bind position. So, but it's going to show us what type of influence we have. Okay, and then I'm going to hit my shift key and just be smoothing a little bit here. Okay, and then this is obviously going to be pinching as we get in here. So I'm going to still remove. Okay. Want nothing over here. Nothing. And just keep going. Then we're going to smooth. We're going to smooth this so the influence is being pushed more on this part, a little bit more to the hip, and the farther away, it's going to smooth it away from the hip. Okay, we don't want anything on this side. And we're going to smooth this, get rid of all that, and just add a little bit of smoothing in there to have some influence, and just keep smoothing this out. So eventually it's going to start looking really, really good. Okay. So from this point on, it's a lot of rinse and repeat. Okay. You're going to be doing this for all of these joints. Okay. And you're going to be rotating them and getting them into place. So kind of see how things are. So you can see we've still got some stuff. Obviously, when we push it up, it's pushing it back. So our tool won't work so well there, but we can pretty easily go in and just grab these verts just by double clicking all of this. And we can actually go into our paint weights tool and go to the tool settings. So here we are on our left hip, that's where all the influence is. And we can actually say we want to replace, and since we have these verts selected, if we can click this flood button and it will flood the value of our brush across everything. So we're going to do that, and it's just going to get rid of it. Since we have these highlighted, it's only going to affect these verts, okay, which is exactly what we want. So, and then we can just get rid of some of this, come back out of that, get rid of some of that influence, replace, and we can go in the model, be looking at things there. It's like, oh yeah, we don't want any of this. Paint all this away. Make my brush smaller. Now, if you start and you press and hold on a surface, it will remember as you slide through another surface which surface you are on. So I can come down, even though I can't see the vert that's down here, I can click, slide down, and you can see it gets rid of that influence on that vert. Okay, so just a fun, good little trick to know about as we're cleaning up all these weights, getting things looking good. And as you can see, there's a lot that goes into painting weights. It's not particularly hard, it's just tedious. You have to go through it. Okay, and there's no way around it. Okay, some things will bind it a little bit better initially, but there's always this level of editing that you've got to go through, and you've got to get these things cleaned up. So from all angles. So we've got all of these. So yeah, here you can see I did too much, so I just smoothed it kind of back into place so that it looked good. I'm going to smooth this, and obviously, here his butt's not going to crunch in that much. So we can take away influence, and that's going to change from side to side. So with how things rotate, there we go. So how everything bunches up on this side is going to be different from how it bunches up on the back side. So there's a lot of balance and a lot of back and forth that you're going to be doing as you look at everything. And you're going to do the same thing with the spine as well. So we'll start getting in here and bending to see like how things are moving on the spine when we bend it, and we'll be like, okay, that looks good forward, it looks good back. We'll check how it twists, and do the same thing. And we just want nice, smooth fall off and everything. So that is it. So basically, in the next video, I will go through and continue painting these weights. And if you want to watch, you're welcome to watch, but you're just basically going to need to go through all of this yourself and get all of your weights painted. And then we'll be ready for our next step.